Okay, well, I wanted to say welcome everyone to our very first talk story via Zoom. And thank you for joining us here this afternoon. You know, we've really been missing you. We got accustomed to seeing you every month at our Know Your Ocean Speaker Series events, and we just can't wait for that series to get started again when life returns to normal. We're glad you're here right now, and we want to do some talking story with you during this time. We're kind of new to this technology. I think we all are, and we're all learning as we go. So please bear with us if some of the things don't go exactly as smooth as can be, but I think we'll get through this. During the very first part of our get-together, we invited our staff to each give you an update, and we told them that they had 5 minutes each. So, so we're going to try to hold everyone to that 5-minute update, so you can kind of hear what's been going on here at Maui Nui Marine Resource Council. And during that time, during these updates, we've muted everyone. So if you're trying to say something and you're not being heard, that's what's going on. You've been muted. And it sounds so rude, but anyway, well, we'd like to just keep it on mute for that presentation part. And we just want to assure you that we really do want to hear what you have to say. And so you will be unmuted later on, so we can all share ideas and questions and suggestions and do some good talking. So to get started, I wanted to introduce you to our guest MC. We brought in a good friend of ours, Darla Palmer-Ellingson. She is someone who has a real passion for volunteerism on environmental issues. And she actually produces and hosts Maui's only commercially broadcast radio show about public affairs relating to the environment and the Hawaiian culture. And she airs a show on Coney FM. And she's also part of the County of Maui Citizens Advisory Council on the climate crisis. She's a member of Al Gore's Reality Project for Hawaii. And we're really grateful to have her here today volunteering with us. So we can all welcome Darla.
Welcome. Thank you so much, and Maui Nui Marine Resource Council for inviting me. You know, I'm always happy to support such a worthy nonprofit doing important work in our community. And we will be recording today's meeting and hopefully be able to play it on our social media channels. And also it's going out on 4 radio stations on HY Media. So that'll be great for everybody to hear. I wanted to first introduce the MNMRC staff. So first we have Robin Newbold, co-founder and chair, Amy Hodges, programs and operations manager, James Strickland III, Hui O Kawaiola project manager, Ann Rolero, communications, community outreach and development manager, Larry Stevens, board member, Michael Fogarty, acting director of MNMRC, John Steimer, lead scientist of MNMRC, Meredith Beeson, administrative assistant, who's also running everything, and any other board members here, you can give us a wave. I'm going to talk a little bit about the format for our meeting. So we are going to first be asking questions of the MNMRC staff. And we'd like to keep you guys on mute for a while just to go through that quick presentation, about 20 minutes or so. And then we're going to jump into your questions for the team, or if you want to make comments too, that is great. We want your input. We value your input. We're going to try and keep this to about a half hour, but since we have quite a few people joining us, if we want to go longer with the Q&A, that's totally great. We may pause at around 30 minutes, just briefly, and then resume. So first, we're going to start with Robin Newbold. Robin, you are the co-founder of Maui Nui Marine Resource Council, and you started the organization 12 years ago. Can you tell me who you co-founded it with and what your goals were at the time?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Darla. Um, about 13 years ago, Dr. Dan Polhemus, who is a well-known marine biologist, and he was the chair of the Department of Land and Natural Resources at the time, he asked Uncle Ed Lindsay and me to start a fisheries council on Maui, similar to the fisheries council they had on the Big Island. But since we didn't have a contentious situation on Maui as they had on the Big Island, Uncle Ed and I worked with others to assemble a wide variety of Maui folks to form the Maui Nui Marine Resource Council. And we called it Maui Nui. A lot of people ask, well, why isn't it just the Marine Resource Council? And it was because Uncle Ed was very adamant that we be sure to let the folks on Molokai and Lanai know that they were welcome and we wanted them to be part of this organization. And our goals at that time, the reason we did it was we wanted to have clean coastal water, just because fish and coral and everything don't live in dirty water. So we wanted clean coastal waters, an abundance of native fish, and healthy coral reefs. And so that's still our goal, and we're making some progress towards that. We feel pretty good about it.
Admirable goals. What accomplishments of the organization are you most proud of?
Well, you know, as you can see on the screen, we've accomplished quite a bit, but by far, I think I'm most proud of our ability to attract such talented and dedicated staff and partners, along with the experts from a wide variety of backgrounds and highly respected scientists. So at any time I can pick up the phone or just send a text to somebody that, you know, is really famous and they just go, okay, Robin, here's what we can do about that, you know, and so it's really nice to have that. And like I said, unbelievable that we have such a great, talented and dedicated staff. I'm also really proud that we're well known and respected in the broader community for our accomplishments, our expertise, and our integrity. I want to say expertise, it's ours, it's very often, or more often than not, one of these folks from the outside who became part of our coral reef recovery team, and they're just available to us. They continue to be available to us. You can see some of the accomplishments on your screen. An early one was to ban the use of lay gill nets in Maui Nui. There was a lot of opposition to that, and we made it happen. We also initiated community management, the Maui Nui Makai Network they've got groups available from Lahaina to Molokai to Lanai and even out to Hana. And so that effort to get the community involved is really important, we thought. The creation of the Maui Coral Reef Recovery Team, which we formed, and they, of course, wrote the recovery plan that guided our you know, what we decided to do, because some people go, okay, why don't you do this or why don't you do that? And we just looked in the recovery plan. If it's there, we do it. And if it's not, we don't. The Hui Okabai Ola water quality monitoring program that James is going to talk to you about a little more, just is amazing that we got that going, and we have really good partners with Ridge to Reef and the Nature Conservancy. And recently, Amy made sure we got a Pohokea stormwater management plan written, and that's going to provide the guidance for the work that we do at Pohokea. And Amy also got us going on putting oysters in Malaya Harbor, just as a test to see if in fact the oysters would live and if they could clean up the harbor. And something really important to me is our relationship with Dr. Bob Richmond. He's always available to help us. He's known, throughout the Pacific. And we supported some of his scientific studies in Olowalu just recently. So those are a few of the things. There's plenty more, but and it's all because of all of you guys who've participated and donated your time.
Well, that is just an amazing list of accomplishments, and I'd love to dig in a little bit more so we can share with everyone. Maui Nui Marine Resource Council is working to improve the ocean water quality in Ma'alai Bay. So I'd love to hear from Amy Hodges, the Programs and Operations Manager, about why this is important. So Amy, can you share with us about that?
Yeah, okay, sure thing. Thanks, Darla. Anne, would you mind just giving the screen over to me?
Yes.
Awesome. Thanks. Bear with me one sec here while we keep up with technology. Doo-doo-doo. All right. So the quality of our ocean water affects the quality of our coral reefs. Obviously, you guys are all here. We know you guys, you know that, we're interested in Matalai Bay because we depend on our reefs. They protect our shores from storm surge and waves. We rely on our reefs to attract visitors here for our economy. They provide home for our wildlife and food for our residents. So of course, climate change is the big major threat to Maui's coral reefs, but there are lots of other really very real threats that originate here on land, on island, that we have control over. So that's like sediment runoff, brown water events we're all familiar with. And with that comes excess nutrients from agriculture and wastewater inputs. So Matalai Bay, why are we working there? It's a perfect example of all of these things going on. It has a large reef tract coming up from South Maui into North Maui and curving around into the bay. It has sediment impacts and excess nutrients from land and ag and wastewater. It's home to our tourism economy there at the harbor, and a lot of our island's important infrastructure and power supply. Miko is right there. It has a highway access going right through Maalaia. So protecting that reef and the coastline of Matalai Bay made a lot of sense to us as a place to focus our work and efforts.
Okay, so you're following the recommendations of the Pohakea Watershed Management Plan, is that right?
Yeah, we've been, we have the Pohakea Watershed Stormwater Management Plan. We've been doing a combination of projects from that plan that are both on land and in the water, things that can help reduce sediment and nutrients from ever reaching the ocean, and then things that can help remove that stuff from the water column in the meantime if it was to reach the ocean. The Pohakea plans by Maui Environmental Consulting a little over a year ago, it identifies a bunch of things that could be issues causing poor water conditions in Matalai Harbor, and then a list of projects that we could work on or partner with our partner organizations and agencies to work on shovel-ready projects for us to get going.
Can you tell us the headlines of some of those projects?
Yeah, sure thing. So on the land, we're working on wildfires. You know, the area is super prone to wildfires, so we're working on doing fuel breaks and fire breaks there. And with that comes some vegetative planning coming along behind it to help erosion loss. We are working on head cut monitoring. The head cuts are large erosion hotspots where the gulches in that watershed come down and meet the culverts that go under the highway. If you ever drive by there and were to look Melka on that highway, you'd see big erosion spots. That's soil loss, sediment that's entering the bay there. So we'll be monitoring and quantifying that soil loss this year, and that helps us prepare for repairing those head cuts in the coming years. We've installed oysters in the harbor, as Robin's mentioned. And of course, one of the most important things, maybe not as sexy as those other projects, but is monitoring. So we're doing before projects, during projects, stormwater monitoring, just get an idea of what's going on there and how our efforts are impacting things.
And I understand that you have a federal grant as part of this. Can you tell us about that? What's the money helping to do?
Yeah, so we do have federal grants there by the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. They are funding the fire breaks and fuel breaks for that area. So we're contracting with local construction companies to install those fire breaks and do vegetation maintenance of the fuel buffers or like buffer zones on either side of the fire breaks. The plants we're using for erosion control are coming from a Maui nursery. We have a Maui-based biologist doing a flora and fauna survey in the watershed, and a local environmental consulting company is doing our field mapping and documentation, and also the head cut monitoring. So that's all federally funded. And it's important that, those federal monies are wonderful, and it's a multi-year grant, which is a dream for us. But we should mention that we've always had strong support from Maui County and other foundations for these projects, and we wouldn't be able to qualify for those federal funds without these matching local funds. So it's really important that we have, the team working on it.
I see. So without the county matching funds, that puts the federal funds at risk.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
the county is always a huge supporter of us, and so, which is wonderful. So, yep.
So as part of your work to improve the ocean water quality at Mahalo Bay, you talked a little bit about the oysters. So always a favorite topic of mine.
Me too.
And I saw your video of them actually in the bay, which was fabulous. Can you tell us a little bit more about them and how that project's going?
Yeah, the oyster project is really fun. Oysters are nature's water filters. It makes perfect sense for us to be utilizing them. We learned from some East Coast projects and projects going on Oahu, just how great and effective these oysters can be at filtering water. And, to eat, to be alive, they suck water in from their surroundings, filter out anything that's in there. They're looking for their primary food source, phytoplankton, but they're filtering everything else at the same time, and they spit out the excess water that's cleaner than when they took it in. So they're a natural filter. We're using them for, it's called bioremediation is the fancy word, but it's just a natural way to help filter the water column. So by placing a bunch of the oysters in Maalaea Harbor, just by them being there, by being alive, sucking water in and out, they're helping to improve the water clarity and condition there.
And I know it was quite a process to get them installed there, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, how many are in there and when were they installed? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, we currently have 1,400 oysters in there. It took a couple years to get through the permitting, which is, just due diligence. But we're really fortunate to have a lot of agency partners there. We've got 1,400 oysters in there right now. That's just the start. Started with 500 in January as a pilot, see if they survived, which they did. And then we added another 880 at the end of March, and then hope to add another maybe 800 in April this month if they fly over from Hilo. So
Wow.
we'll add those in. And yeah, they live in these cages that's just for their own protection against predators and so that we can care for them. And the cages are suspended under the dock infrastructure there at the harbor.
What's the overall goal? How many do you plan on putting in?
Yeah, we'll continue to add more oysters over the next 2 years, I want to say probably. We'll probably get into the tens of thousands as far as quantity of oysters in the harbor. It's based on how many spots for cages we can reasonably place within the harbor and care for, and how many oysters we can put per cage. So it's based on species and size. And that'll determine when we max out on numbers. But they're gaining weight, which means they're growing, which means they're filtering water and eating. And so that's how we know it's a success so far.
Great.
Yeah.
That's such an interesting project, and the whole area, the whole watershed area, and it goes up to like 6,400 feet up into the mountains. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Big area.
Mm-hmm. Very big. So, you would never be able to put enough oysters in the harbor itself to filter all of that runoff.
Right.
But that's not the point. It's important to remember that the oysters are great and really approachable project, but they're not a cure-all. They're kind of the last resort. It's once runoff has reached the ocean, then the oysters do their work. But of course, we'd rather prevent the bad stuff from ever getting in the water in the first place.
Right. And I think you showed that really well with all of the work being done. I mean, there's a lot of different parts to it. So thank you so much, Amy.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks. I wanted to dig a little bit into ocean water quality. It's very important to Maui Nui Marine Resource Council. So let's talk a little bit with James Strickland and about the water quality monitoring program. He's the project manager of the Hui Oka Viola program. How does the program work, James?
Hey, Darla. First, are you guys able to see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yep.
Okay, good. So our program, we're volunteer based, so it's really citizen science, and it's the community stepping up and saying, hey, we want to know what's going on with our coastal water. We want to know how healthy it is or how unhealthy it is. So we've been going for about 3 years on the west side, taking samples, and then about 2 years on the south side. And we have teams of volunteers that go out, community members that go out every 3 weeks and take samples. And we
Okay.
have 19 sites on the west side, 22 on the south side.
Okay, great. And I hear you added a couple of sites recently as well.
Yeah, so we're constantly reviewing our data. And in fact, I have some pretty cool graphs that go over what we've learned so far, or some of the things we've learned so far, but we're constantly reviewing our data and seeing if there's new sites that we want to add or sites that we want to drop. And we, due to one of the things, there's a research project going on in the harbor, we had 2 sites. Because a lot of the sites, nobody knew before we got in and started testing. Like, nobody knew nutrient levels, nobody knew the variability levels, nobody knew the temperature fluctuations. So that's something pretty exciting. So now we have a good baseline of data. In fact, let's go on to,
Yeah,
so I will say that, yeah.
I'm sorry. So I just wanted to ask you, maybe you're going to talk about it. What are you sampling for?
Oh, so we did start Enterococcus. We've just started that at the very end of 2019. That's a fecal bacteria that the Department of Health uses and EPA uses as a indicator to see if there's maybe viruses or bad bacteria in the water that could lead to maybe some sort of infection or something. But the 2 things I want to really talk about today, 2 big things are turbidity and nutrient. So, and those are the graphs that I have. So the turbidity is just how clear the water is. It's like smoke in the air, how hazy things are. So the higher the turbidity, the higher the cloudiness of the water. So less visibility. And the problem with turbidity is that there's a lot of things in the water that need the sunlight to go through. A lot of plants, the algae that live in the coral, they need the sunlight to make energy and then give the coral food. So the higher the turbidity, the less those light particles going down, they bounce off all the gunk, all the sediment, all the things floating around. So everything has to work a lot harder at the bottom of the I guess the ocean are things that need that sunlight to produce energy. And then nutrients, agricultural runoff or sewage. And there's a lot of just weird stuff that happens when you have too many nutrients in water. The coral, the algae that live in the coral start to act weird. And then you'll have things like, if you've ever seen the tumors on sea turtles, that's because they're getting too much nitrogen in their diets.
Right.
So there's just a lot of bad things that happen when you have too many nutrients. It just sets off the balance.
Can you tell me more about the nitrogen isotope testing that you're doing?
Yeah, so that's something exciting. So there's this nitrogen 15 isotope testing that we've started doing, and really it's just another tool in our toolbox that we're just working on. And so right now, so if you can see my slide, and those listening on the radio, we're looking at Honolulu Bay. So it's on the slide, it's the very first bar. And so Honolulu, if you look at the brown, so the very first line going up, that's our turbidity. So we're able to see nutrients. But the thing with the nitrogen 15 testing is that we don't know what type of nutrients we have in the water, because we know nutrients can come from fertilizer or could come from sewage. So the nitrogen 15 testing will actually give us a better indication if it's coming from sewage or if the nutrients in the water is coming from fertilizer. So that's with that. But now looking at the graph, so this data is normalized. And so for Honolulu, we've had 70 data points for this. So we've tested 70 times we've tested 70 times, and this is just a geometric mean of that testing. But this is normalized. So if you see the red bar, the red horizontal bar at the bottom, That's the state standard. So the state Department of Health, they have a standard saying that if you have any parameter that goes above that, well, then that site is impaired for that parameter. So here, if you're looking at Honolulu, the brown bar going up, so you see how it goes right above the 40. So according to the Department of Health, Honolulu for turbidity is impaired 40 times over what it should be for turbidity. And then the bar right next to it, yeah, so the bar right next to it is nutrients, nitrates and nitrites. But so you can see, you can go through this graph, and if anyone has any questions later, I do want to get to 2 more slides right quick.
Okay.
But you can also see that pretty much for every single level, or for every single site we test at, it's impaired. And quite often it's impaired way over what the Department of Health says it should be. So this is the west side. And then just jumping straight to the south side, let's look at Cove Park. Cove Park is right in the middle. So if you look at Cove Park, so on the west side, we have the nutrients. The west side nutrients are pretty low, but turbidity is really high. So it's sort of the opposite on the south side. You have the nutrients that are really high. But if you look at Cove Park, you see how it goes above 100?
Right.
So Cove Park is about 105 times and over the impairment level of what the Department of Health says any body of water should be.
And that's where we see all the beginning surfers and people out in the water.
Yeah, that's always sort of get a little giggle when you drive by there and you see so many people out there. And you're just thinking, wow, the levels are so high.
So
I don't know if I'd be out there.
Well, that's a good point to bring up. When you submit this data to the state, how does that help the public know what's going on with the water, the cleanliness of the water?
So right now, the Department of Health, they put out a report every 2 years. So this data, they haven't put this out in the report yet, but that goes back to the nitrogen 15 testing, because we don't know if this, we don't know where these nutrients are coming from. We don't know if it is sewage or if it is agricultural runoff.
Right.
So that's something that our program, yes?
Well, I was just going to say there's more timely alerts as well. I mean, this is a great amount of data, but isn't there also alerts that, like when we see the signs at the beach parks and so forth?
Yeah, so there's two types of alert. There's the brown water. So whenever you go out and it looks like chocolate milk, there's the brown water advisory that you shouldn't go out in. And then there's also bacteria advisories that the Department of Health puts out.
Okay.
So one more thing I do want to show. So this is 3 years of data. So if you just look at Napili, so if you look at the far left, just the 3 bars, so the blue is 2017, the red is 2018, and then the green is 2019. So each one of these sites is showing 3 years worth of data.
Right.
But if you look at Napili, you can see, and this is turbidity. So this is a measurement of how clear the water is. So you can see, like Napili, things aren't getting better. Things are just gradually getting worse.
Right.
So it looks like in 2017, Napili was about 1.5 times what the state standard is for impairment. But now fast forward to 2019, and it's already over 2 times what the state says is the impairment level. Okay. So, and you can look at, we have this, so we have these data sets for West Maui, and then we also have them for South Maui. But just due to time constraints, I just wanted to focus on West Maui. And also, all these graphs are up on our website, huokaviola.com. And if you look at the data section, you can see graphs just showing all of our data.
So, James, I just wanted to wrap up by mentioning, when you first came on, I remember speaking with you, and we were talking about how important it was to collect this data over time. You can start to see some real trends here. You just mentioned it's not getting better. So, you know, that makes the work so valuable. How is this program funded?
Oh, so first, yeah. So thanks for bringing that up about the just the time link, because you'll have groups that come in, like say a PhD student that will work on something for 2 weeks and then they leave, but there's no long baseline that
Right.
like we have. But so it's a mixed bag of funding. But we have private citizens, individuals. We have some companies that do it, and then we do get a large amount from the county of Maui.
Okay.
And each site costs about $4,000 a year for
So
the testing.
if the County of Maui funding is at risk, then this project is at risk as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Well, thank you so much for sharing, James. I really appreciate it. And I know you're next on the agenda, but we have someone else that would like to speak up. We've got another staff member, John Starmer. So he has some things he'd like to share. If we can interject John for just a few minutes. John, are you with us?
I'm here. And
Hi, John.
All
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot there, but I got a message that you wanted to talk.
No worries, no worries. I'll just share my screen real quick. And
Can you give us your title too?
good question. I guess I'm the lead scientist at MNMRC.
Thank you.
So I'm a relative newcomer here, and this is a really part-time job for me, but it sort of keeps me in, keeps my gills wet because my background's marine science and I'm doing something totally different now. So I've been really excited to work with MNMRC and especially kind of expanding the understanding of water quality. So two of the things that I'm doing dovetail very nicely with what Amy described, talking about the Pauakea watershed and the harbor in specific, and then also the stuff that James is doing, also kind of a larger scale sort of look at water quality. And let me go ahead and present this so it's a little bit more beautiful. There we go. So there's basically two efforts that I've been working with MRC on specifically, one of which is a kind of a large scale water quality investigation, looking at kind of getting a snapshot of water quality all around the island. And the idea is to actually circumnavigate Maui, and the weather has been a little bit difficult for the south and eastern sides, but we've gotten this far over the course of 3 days. So Molokini was easy, ran basically up from La Perouse to Lahaina, and then we've gotten one break into weather where we got from the Kaului Harbor up the east coast there on the north. And what we're doing is using this instrument. This was a instrument that was donated by, or the funding was donated by Lush Cosmetics, and it's a multi-parameter data probe. So each of those, this isn't exactly the unit that we have, it's from the sales brochure, but basically we are able to measure multiple water quality characteristics at the same time and tie it to a GPS so we know exactly where it is. And you can totally, and we do use it handheld. It has a little computer that's hooked into it, but for this larger scale work, what we did is we actually got a captain from Mike Severance Diving to help us out and allowed us to modify his boat a little bit. So if you can see on the middle picture here, the probe is stuck into that black tube, and we've got a little bilge pump that's pulling water through the hull and then out over the back. And then as we go around the island, we can get water quality measurements and know where they are. If you haven't seen it, there was a nice little video that MNMRC put together that kind of dives into the details. So I'll leave it to you to kind of check it out if you're interested in the gory details of what it's all about. But this is an example of what we get out of it. Now, this is just showing salinity, and nothing wrong with the Fairmont Hotel. This is just the location. But what's interesting here is these are two tracks from 2 different days. And basically dark blue is more saline, closer to open ocean water, and white is getting less saline. So it's indicating that there's a freshwater influence. And this one in particular is interesting because the little white dots that you can see are pretty discrete, and they're also over lava. And it's known that there are times when you get lava tubes that can potentially push water out and have it coming up offshore. So these are all surface water measurements. It's quite possible that the one day was a little bit calmer and the other day was a little bit, there was more current, so that signal wasn't quite as strong. But this is the sort of stuff that you can pick up. And we've been, again, we're trying to do this all around the island. Another case, again, 2 different days. This is by the quarry that's up past or up north of Oluwalu. Again, one day, very strong sort of freshwater signal. The other day, not quite so much. This might be something where often as water flows offshore, it mixes more. So it could be that the signal here is something that's actually more persistent. And these are the sort of clues that we're looking for to say, hey, is it worth going in and doing something more intensive to understand what's going on? Here's another case up in Lahaina. This one was interesting because the day that we kind of got in closer to shore, the current was going to the north, and you can see that the water's coming out of the drainage here, the channelized stream. There was not very strong flow, but clear flow, and you can see on the surface the water getting pushed up north. So you can see how coastal water sticks to the coast in this case. And again, slight suggestion of water, diffuse fresh water further up when we were offshore. And just I'll mention that each of these dots is taken about 5 seconds apart, and the machine is really remarkable. We could have done a second, but it would have just been almost too much data. So it's really remarkable how much data you can collect with this instrument in a very short time. So thanks to Lush again for funding that.
Amazing.
This sort of maps to the sort of stuff that James is doing. The spot here at the end is actually a HUI site, and then these other 3 are sites that we are replicating the methodology but aren't actually measured by the HUI because maps to what we need to do to understand Pohake and the harbor. It wasn't quite in line with what the HUI is doing with the broader scale public health sort of work. But we are getting equivalent data, so we can both use the data that the HUI is collecting in other spots in the watershed. So they do Haycraft Beach within the watershed. So all of this data is working together to help us understand what water quality is doing around Maui. Okay. One of the questions and one of the reasons we have things like the Oyster Project going on in there is that people have noted that the harbor is not the most pleasant place to swim. Clearly it's not so clear and most of the time, but after we've, and there are certainly a lot of water quality violations, but as we've been looking at it, it is getting more and more interesting because the turbidity seems to really be driven environmentally. We've had a couple of really big sediment inputs thanks to some big storms. And those things actually clear out fairly rapidly. After a few days to a week, the harbor is back to normal. And normal really isn't a steady state. It can be murky if you have southerly swells or south wind. It can be nearly crystal clear if you have wind from the north. So it's not a constant bad state, at least in terms of turbidity. The other thing that we were looking at, and that things like the WHO are doing and looking at nutrients, is trying to understand the freshwater. And this little track here is informative. There is this persistent signal of freshwater influence here around the boat ramp. It's not a lot. I mean, it's basically a few parts per thousand, but freshwater is known to be a really good way to get nutrients from places like septic tanks or injection wells or agricultural activities and move those nutrients into the water. And it seems like there are some nutrient concerns, and it may be that if we can figure out if this is actually groundwater, seems to probably be, but if it's something like a broken pipe, that might be a really easy fix. And really a lot of what this stuff is doing is just giving us some clues. Where do we, start looking more seriously? Where could this, if we get things like the WHOI program is finding, you say, okay, we're getting these violations, but now we need some finer scale understanding of, well, like, where is it coming from?
Right.
And this instrument and finer sampling is a way to start kind of narrowing down some options in terms of where you could look at a little bit more intensively.
Okay. Well, John, I so appreciate you sharing that with us. We're at that time where we're just going to take a really brief pause, but everyone that's online, if you still have questions, hang in there. And I just wanted to take a moment and encourage each and every one of you that are participating and your contacts. We are going to be asking you to please contact your Maui County Council person and ask for support. But anyway, so that is our brief break. I'm going to welcome you back to the second part of Maui Nui Marine Resource Council's very first online meeting. Their online version of Know Your Ocean Speaker, since we are all in quarantine over COVID-19. This is a great way to meet and talk story. I'm gonna jump to Anne. I did want to ask John if were you done with your comments? Did you want to continue on after our timing break that we just took?
I guess the one thing I would add is that the one kind of constant in the harbor is change. So it looks like there's a lot of variables at play that are driving what makes the water clear and not clear, and indications of freshwater input. And there are times when the harbor is beautiful. There's times when it's not, and it's really trying to bring all the pieces together. Stuff like what the WHOI is doing, this specific project, and things like the efforts with the oysters to both try and figure out what the problems are and where they're coming from, and then also being able to figure out what a sensible solution is.
Okay, well, great. Thanks for wrapping that up, John. I really appreciate your input. And this is a really big week for Maui Nui Marine Resource Council because of the Maui County Council's Economic Development and Budget Committee meetings that are going on. I'm reaching out to you to explain that to us as the outreach and fundraising person for the group. Why is this important to our coral reefs and ocean water quality?
Okay, and John, if you would just let me share my screen, that would be great. So this week is really important because right now the Maui County Council is working on the 2021 budget. And the county, as Amy's mentioned and as James mentioned, the county has been a major supporter of our programs. And right now, the funding for our programs for clean ocean water and healthy coral reefs, the funding for those programs is not in the mayor's budget. The mayor proposes a budget, and then the county council goes to work on it, and then they vote on the final budget. And so right now, we're counting on the county council members to put funding back in the budget for the Huiokawai Olaf water quality program, for the work we're doing in Pohakea, for the oyster project. So we've been told by council members that we've talked with, they've said that their decisions are largely based on what they hear from the community. And so we need the community to speak up and say, hey, COVID-19 is really a concern, but it's going to end someday. And when that ends, we're going to be looking back at the ocean. The coral reefs were really in trouble before COVID came around, and now it's, and they will still be in trouble after COVID. We really need funding to support the work that we're doing for the coral reefs and for clean ocean water. So we're asking everyone to speak up this week. Let me just see if I can share. I have a little info slide here.
You gonna tell us how we can do that?
Yeah. Why am I
Okay.
not? Okay. This isn't my slide, is it? No. Okay. Okay. So what we're asking everyone to do is to send a letter to the county budget committee, and we can email all of you with that information to send it this week, send a testimony to them. What's maybe the only silver lining in this whole COVID thing is that we can testify from home. We don't have to go down to Wailuku to testify. So you can also testify online using this program called Blue Jeans, which is kind of like Zoom. The county's using Blue Jeans, but you can sign up on Thursday morning, 9 a.m. or Friday morning, 9 a.m. or also Friday at 6 p.m. to go on and to deliver your 3-minute plea for funding for the projects that support healthy coral reefs and clean ocean water. So yeah, that's my quick appeal on that. And I know a bunch of you have written letters. George, I know you testified, and we really appreciate that. And if we can just keep it up, it will really make a difference. Thank you.
That's such a big challenge, Anne, and so important for the community to support. So thank you so much for that. And now it's your turn. Everybody in the audience, we are looking for your questions, your comments. But first, when you want to speak, if you could raise your hand, I'm going to tell you how to do that real quick. So if you mouse over the bottom of your Zoom meeting screen, you'll see an additional set of controls pop up, and you can click on the icon labeled participants, then click on the raise hand button. You can try it now while I'm talking if you'd like. Your digital hand will then be raised, and our great assistant will let me know that you're waiting to speak. Also, when you mouse over the bottom of the screen, you'll see a microphone icon. If there is a line through the mic, when you are ready to start talking, click on it to unmute yourself. And when you're done talking, you can click the mic again to mute yourself again. So do we have anybody here waiting yet? You know, I don't see, oh, we do have some hands raised here. And let's see. Shall we, I don't see a message from Meredith, who is first, so maybe I will.
George.
Okay, so let's hear from George. Can we go to George?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
We can.
Oh, well, this is great. Thank all of you. I was just curious from James about the N15 testing. Is the WHOI doing that or somebody else? How's that work?
Yeah, so it's we go out and we collect limu. We collect limu, and then we dry it out, and then there's a lab that we send it to, and we're actually in the process right now of picking sites for that. So it's really in its infancy.
The volunteers are doing the picking limu, or just the team leads?
So right now it's just going to be the team leads, but we're still figuring it out.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, it could be really exciting if it does give us the results. You know, if it does actually distinguish between. So it's all, you know, the nutrients that the limu's getting. So yeah, it could be really exciting if it really does distinguish between if we're able to say, hey, this, you know, well, this is, you know, sewage, or this is fertilizer, or, you know, really help whenever we go upslope to work with partners or figure out the source of the pollution.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much, George. It looks like Brad Tarr has his hand up. Are you ready to talk to us, Brad?
I think so. Can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, great. This question is actually for Amy.
Okay.
And my question, Amy, is back in the 70s, I was in the water quite a bit at Maalaea, and there was a large population of the pinna shell. And and that's a bivalve. And I just wondered if you've been in the water and done any surveys to see if that population is still as dense as it used to be, because that was a good natural water filter back in those days as well.
Yeah, right on, Brad. Good to see you. We haven't done bivalve surveys ourselves in the harbor. We did have Dr. Maria Haas snorkeling around in there from the UH Hilo Patrick facility, and she was collecting some samples of different bivalve species in there. I haven't seen, like you're saying, a large horde of that species in there. Mostly what we do have wild occurring in the harbor right now is just what's called the native Hawaiian oyster. And they're very, very small. And we are going to be using those in the oyster project in the future, and we are permitted to use a few different kind of bivalves, including the Hawaiian clam and the black-lipped pearl oyster. But I'm not familiar with that species. But you know what? Next time Maria comes over, as soon as she can fly again, I'm gonna jump in the water with her and ask for that species specifically, because I don't.
The reason I bring that up is it was I remember of all the places I dove, that had the densest population of anywhere. And
Really?
if it had a large mortality, I just wondered what the cause was. And I'm sure that was a bivalve and was probably a very good filter feeder or water filter organism back then. So it's bad that it's not there, because they were just very, very abundant. And they would have done the same job as the oysters are now.
Are those the little, like, look like little mussels? Those ones?
No, they're quite large. They're quite large.
Okay.
Pinna is the genus. I think
Yeah.
Pinnidae might be the family.
Okay.
P-I-N-A.
Yep. I'm gonna whip out my Hawaiian seashell book right now. But
Thank you very much.
yeah, thanks, Brad. Well, the one thing I will say that is growing abundantly there, mostly at the outfalls, with the little tiny mussels. But that's not what you're talking about.
All right. Well, good job. Thank you much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. And it looks like next we have Andrew Fox. Andrew, are you ready to speak with us?
I am. I have a question. I have a couple questions. I'll just start with one.
Mm-hmm.
Has there been any water quality testing since everything shut down? So since the tourist impact on the beaches is less and there's less pleasure boating and stuff like that, can you tell if there's been any change in the water quality?
So good question. We weren't, it's only recently that we were deemed essential. So we haven't done any testing in April, but we're actually planning on going out as early as next week and actually do some testing. And we want to, because we're curious, sites that we have really high nutrient levels. We're curious about those sites to see, because we have so much less, there's so much less sewage right now on the island, and so we're curious to see how some of our sites are affected. But that should be interesting. So we plan on going out as early as next week.
I will add to that that I have been able to go care for the oysters because it's a livestock agriculture kind of thing. So I've been at the harbor and I have been able to grab a few samples while I'm there just around the harbor. So we're waiting for those nutrient samples to come back from the lab on Oahu, but we will have those from around the harbor and just on either side of the harbor. And I don't know if John has been out with the probe at all on. He's not thumbing up. Yeah, he has been out with the probe during the past few weeks. So we'll have that data.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Andrew, for the question. And it looks like next up we have Sierra Club Maui Group. Maybe you could tell us your real name, not just the group name. Are you ready to talk to us? I'm not sure who that would be under
There we go. Can you hear me?
Oh, there you are.
Hi, it's Keisha Joy. It's so great to see so many environmental warriors together. I hope you are all well and healthy. And yes. Yeah, that was one of my questions is there any testing since there's no visitors on the island? That would be really interesting. Also, I've been making my calls, of course, to the county council members, and I'm getting a lot of answer machines, of course, because everybody's working from home. But I did get a hold of Melina's staff, and Gary says that Melina is in support of it, adding that to the budget on Friday. So I just wanted to share that.
Awesome.
Mike Molina is, and I'm getting, I have the ability to do a mass email. If you guys could get to me really quickly, the exact information of what people need to do, I can get that out like today.
Do it.
Yeah,
Great.
so we can get more people to give testimony. So I just wanted to say that. And
Oh, thank you, Keisha.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Hey, I think that Andrew had another question, if I remember right, and Andrew, and I don't have anybody waiting right now. So would you like to ask your other question?
How's that? There we go. Okay. So my next question was about, is it possible to add more racks for extra oysters once you've tapped out on what you can store right now?
Yeah, you can. It's a pretty cool aquaculture system, honestly, that we're using. So right now we just have one on each. We have one basket hanging on each line, essentially, but you do have the ability to hang them like ladder rungs. You have the ability to float them on floats.
Yeah.
So there are sections in the harbor where boats cannot go. It's too shallow, and those would be possible areas where we could go nuts with the oysters and put them over there, and that's just a matter of access for our volunteers. Yeah, it's pretty good. And you can put the Pacific oysters we're using right now can get pretty big. We'll put maybe 100 to 200 in each basket. The native species oysters or some of the other species are much smaller, and you can fit quite a few more into each basket. So that's pretty good. Yeah, actually, is there anyone else with a question? You guys want to see a 30-second video of them hanging in the water? Would that work?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Let me pull it up here. I think I got it. I'm going to share my screen again. This one. Let's see. Here we go. Sorry if you have slow internet connection, but this is a GoPro on the end of a stick. And we're going down under the infrastructure of the harbor here where they're hanging. And we're going to take a little swim with the oysters. So this is just after the first batch came in. So we only had, 3 or 6 cages. There's only 100 oysters in each cage. And they're baby, right? They haven't grown to size yet. But this is them hanging in the water column and me trying to find it on camera on the stick. But it's pretty shallow right there, and we're trying to keep them in a depth of water where, the crabs can't super easily jump or swim up to them. Of course, they still can, but that's it. And now we're upside down, so I'll pause you on that. That's the video.
Well, thank you, Amy. Love the oyster video. I think George had another question. George, are you there?
Yes. Am I on?
Yes, you are.
I just wanted to mention, I asked Council Member Rollins Fernandez one day, I said, what's more effective, oral testimony or written testimony? And she said oral testimony. She said the written testimony pretty much gets summarized as for or against. So if you want to, have your face and your emotions and all your points actually listened to, the oral testimony is supposed to be better. I mean, sometimes you wonder if they've all made up their minds anyway, but I think the Blue Jeans program is just as easy to use as this Zoom. So those of you that can do the oral testimony, I'd recommend it.
Thank you, George. And Larry, we've got Larry next, our board member, Larry Stevens. Are you ready to talk, Larry?
Yes, I just wanted to second what George just said. We were talking to Kelly King's associate today, and she was saying that very few people are testifying via the video, and that the council members are very sensitive to people who come and testify on the budget. So if any of you have any kind of chance, 9 o'clock in the morning, tomorrow and Friday, you can sing our praises or say anything else you want to do. The environmental programs are getting hammered in the mayor's budget. So any positive sentiment you can bring to the table would be much appreciated. You get 3 minutes, and if you have more than one issue to talk about, you get another 3 minutes. So now's the time. And I think we have a real chance to have our voices heard because so few other people are testifying. Thank you.
So Larry, can I ask you a question?
Of course.
Do you know when you testify, is it live? Is it a live video testimony or is it recorded?
Live video testimony, yes.
Okay.
And you are visible to the council and audible to the council, and they also record it as part of their AKQ system.
You don't happen to know if there's a queue, like when I've gone to testify on some of these matters before, I was there for 4 hours and I think there was 99 people ahead of me. So is there a queue where we can see,
I believe there is a queue, but I haven't used it myself, so I can't really give you any details, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, I'm hopeful that that's the case because if it's media like we're using now, then we can, kind of see maybe where we are status wise. So I think that's a really helpful way to testify.
I can answer that.
Okay.
When I logged on to Blue Jeans, I did right at 9 a.m. on Monday, and I was told I was number 3 in the queue. So when you log in, you get told.
Perfect.
But you don't know how many are following you. And it turned out that day there were only 7 testifiers. So if you had waited to 9:30 to log in, the testimony was closed. So I recommend anybody who wants to testify, do it right at 9 a.m. Log in anyway. And if you're far back in the queue, maybe you can take a break. But
Did
that's
I hear someone
so helpful.
That there's a 6 p.m. testimony as well time? Did I hear that earlier?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, there is. Oh, somebody's sharing their screen.
It's a bit bigger. Sorry.
Okay, so looks like we have up on the screen how to testify by phone. Phone number 408-740-7256, and input the meeting ID, which I think, Ann, you said you're going to send us out by email.
Yes.
And then also how to testify by video conference. So thank you, George, for explaining that. That was very helpful. And I think that Andrew had another question. Is that right, Andrew?
It's more a comment.
Okay.
I went to a presentation down at Keelio Ponds a couple months ago, and there was a speaker from the Forest Service who talked about using native plants as fire breaks. She called them green breaks. And there were a couple of plants that had won out when they were doing their testing over at Mahalo on the Big Island. So Susan Cordell is her name, and she's based over on the Big Island, and she had recommendations for what plants to use in the areas to break up sections of wildfire, because it was also an issue for the National Wildlife Refuge. The fire came right up to the building, and so they were very interested in figuring out how to keep the fire from advancing so much. So Nio, Oeo, and I think Aki grass were the 3 in combination that seemed to, with like a 20-foot wedge, they were effective at slowing the fire and just keeping it from spreading quite so rapidly.
Sure.
It was
interesting.
Yeah.
Hey, we had a comment come in from Mark Decos, and I just wanted to read it because I think it's really good. We said that we were going to send out some talking points by email, and he's asking to make sure that there's a short blurb about the programs that should be supported and why. We're on a pretty tight time limit to get that testimony in. So, Ann, is that something that we can do?
Certainly. Be glad to do
Okay.
that. Great idea, Mark. Thank you.
Great. And then next, Mike Foley has a question. Are you ready to talk, Mike? There
Hello,
he is.
can you hear me?
We can.
All right, excellent. Thank you for the presentation, multiple presentations. That was great information. It's great to see all the work that's going on. I had a question for Amy. Amy, in terms of the long-term goals for the oyster project, you know, if you show great success in Ma'alaya, do you imagine there's other places on Maui or in Maui Nui that we could roll out this type of mitigation? And also, you know, on the East Coast, oyster reefs are pretty huge. Have you given thought to, you know, long-term sustainable kind of resilient substrate that you could plant oysters on rather than hanging them, you know, in cages?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Ultimately, yeah, this is a pilot project. If it's successful over the next few years, then we definitely would want to expand it to other places in Maui Nui. The easiest places for us to start and work in are, of course, the harbors, and those are generally places that need the help. Also, we've been contacted by fish pond groups, like on Molokai, that might be interested in it. The concern with the oysters is, or not concern, but Mark's getting a call. One of the things we think about with the hard substrate is that, you know, the oysters could be competing with coral for that substrate. You know, we don't have the same oyster beds here as the East Coast has. So that's just something to be considered, but definitely something that I would be open to. Haven't looked into free range oysters yet. That's definitely a few steps out for us. But, you know, oysters used to be prolific here in certain areas and certain species. So if we could bring that back, you know, we have a no shellfishing law in effect right now in Hawaii, but wouldn't it be great if our waters were clean enough and the species were abundant enough that, you know, people could harvest them? Not the ones we're using for restoration, but what if they were to be back in abundance in native populations? That would be wonderful. What do you think? What do you think about using them like an oyster bed, reef break, like surge protection kind stuff?
Yeah, no, I think it's, you know, if you're introducing new substrate and you're not using, you know, the existing substrate, that's, you know, I think there is potential. And of course, it would have to be in the right place at the right time. Probably not in a pristine ecosystem, the ones that we have left, but in an area where it's highly degraded and infested already with invasive species. I mean, introducing native oysters on any sort of substrate, especially if it's an engineered structure, I think there'd be multiple benefits. I think it'd also be interesting to look into how structures, how their lifespan may be either increased or decreased by having an organism like an oyster provide a layer of protection to a concrete or another type of material. So there could be multiple benefits, not only from the environmental side, but also from the infrastructure lifetime.
Interesting. That's awesome. I don't see any other hands raised, and we went a little bit past our time estimate. I just wanted to ask maybe if any of our leaders want to make a final comment. Robin, to wrap up. Don't mean to catch you unprepared, but anyone have any final words they want to share with us before we wrap up here?
Well, Darla, I did see Keisha had her actual hand up.
Oh, okay. I see that now. Okay, Keisha, you're on.
Just since we're talking about Ma'alaya Bay, is everybody aware of the petition that has been circulating to buy the open space Mauka of Ma'alaya? And that's, I think, to be an open space that the county purchased that land. Has anybody know about that? I think that's being discussed on Friday as well, as the plastic ban on Friday. So if you get on to give testimony, there's 3 really amazing things to speak about. Preserving that land, saving this water testing, putting that money in the budget, and banning plastic.
Great. Well, it looks like Larry raised his hand, so maybe he's got a comment about that.
Yeah, Kelly King, our South Maui council member, put a proviso request for $500,000 to make a grant to the Hawaiian Islands Land Trust to negotiate a purchase of this land with the landowner. And that money is not guaranteed to be funded, but it's in the budget. And if you could, it would be great to include that in your testimony, supporting that that grant, so that we could hopefully find a way forward with the Spencer family.
Okay. Anyone else?
I'd like to just mention that, you know, when you start talking about environmental programs and projects, there is the financial side too. And so, for example, with the County of Maui, we have a $300,000 grant from National Fish and Wildlife Federation or Foundation. And that is federal money that we're bringing into Maui. And we're using it right now in the Pohakea watershed. We're doing projects, we're putting people to work. We're hiring contractors to go out there and move dirt and do things to help improve the fire breaks in the watershed. And so it's kind of a cool cycle, you know, what's benefiting the coral reefs by keeping sediment out of the water also benefits people. It puts people to work. And it's also helping to suppress the fire danger that we have there in Pohakea. So I think those points are really important to make when you talk with the county council, just so they understand the dollars and cents perspective. And Maui Nui Marine Resource Council, you know, we just submitted a pre-proposal for another grant from the same federal fund. And that's looking at things we can do in the Kihei Ma'alaya area to reduce sediment runoff onto the reefs so that the reefs can be strong and help protect the community from storms and big waves and things like that. And so we're looking at things like the Kalani'ihakoi Gulch area, which just recently flooded, you know, and when that thing floods, it just sends a ton of sediment down into the ocean. So one of the things in our proposal is to do a study looking at what we can do to stop that flooding. And again, that's bringing federal money into Maui County to put Maui County contractors to work. And you know, it's kind of how we're looking at things. You know, we're looking upslope and also looking at Maui's economy and how we can benefit it with some of the programs that we're doing.
Right. I think you bring up some really excellent points, Anne, and one thing I hope people keep in mind is the value that Maui Nui Marine Resource Council brings to the community through these projects. You know, it's something that is really tangible. It's a tangible return, and I think that is something that will resonate with our county council. Anyone else want to add in before we close up?
I think Robin does. I see her.
Okay, Robin.
Darla, I want to thank you for leading this project today. We really appreciate you volunteering your time and making it happen. So thank you. And of course, Anne has done a lot of work. I know things went so smoothly that we all might think that it was just happened, but it doesn't happen that way. So thank you, Anne. And Meredith has been great, just behind the scenes, taking care of a lot of the, you know, showing us in some cases how to use the system. And of course, Amy's always right here on the ball. It's great to see George back again. Hi, George, thank you. And Brad Tarr from Florida. Yeah, just all of you, thank you. And appreciate you being here, thank you.
Thank you, Robin, and thank you all for participating. And like we mentioned, you should be able to view this on YouTube, Facebook channels. We'll be sending out information on that, and see if we can get it on Island Environment 360, which airs on Coney 104.7, K-Rock 97.3, KRYL Country 106.5, and Retro 102.1 on Maui, Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. And again, encouraging everyone participating or listening to get that testimony in. As we heard today, that audio or video testimony seems to be more powerful. So if you can do that to support Maui Nui Marine Resource Council, we'd really appreciate it. And if you want to learn more about the organization, go to mauireefs.org. And mahalo, everyone. Stay safe, stay well.